Hello and welcome to SaksWorks Online. I'm Rachel Sklar, VP of Programming and Content at SaksWorks, and we are so happy to welcome you today to our virtual space. I'm in actual SaksWorks in our beautiful plant-filled space where I hope to welcome all of you at some point when you feel comfortable. But in the meantime, I am delighted to welcome you here today for some of our I would say this is the pinnacle of our signature programming of fantastic speakers offering real life, amazing actionable advice in real time. I just wanted a little bit about SaksWorks. We are a new membership club and community. We are open for co-working, for meetings, for grabbing a coffee with a friend, or for attending programming like this in person or online, I guess, as the case may be. And we're new. So we would love to welcome you. Please come visit us at SaksWorks.com and sign up for a complimentary day pass. And we will see you soon. And in the meantime, we will see you right now for this incredible session with Shoket and The.Li.st. It's the first of our 5-part series. And we are so excited. The.Li.st is a fantastic community of really just the most go-getting, ambitious, powerful, make it happen women. I'm biased because I'm a longtime member and have a lot of wonderful friends in the mix, one of them being Anne. So I'm going to turn it over to Anne to lead the session with Erin Clark of Vital Voice Training, How to Talk so people will listen. We are so happy to have you. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. It's a thrill to be here. And thank you so much to SaksWorks for presenting this series, the Set Yourself Up for Success in 2022, which, deep breath, everybody. It's here. I am Anne Shoket, founder and CEO of New Power Media and owner of The.Li.st. I am thrilled that we have so many listers here today. And I think we have some members of our Big Life community as well. The.Li.st is a network of high impact women in media technology and entrepreneurship. And it's an amazing community, as Rachel said, of women who are devoted to helping each other achieve and succeed. And so in a partnership like this, I am so thrilled to bring the expertise of the women who are devoted to helping each other achieve and succeed to help everyone achieve and succeed. After 2 years of sitting in our tiny little rooms and in our tiny little Zoom boxes, I think we could all use a brush up of how to speak so people listen. There is no one that I would rather get this information from than Erin Clark, who, when she walks into a room, which I've had the privilege of being in her actual real life presence, she just exudes warmth and amazing energy that you want to be around. And so now she is going to unlock the secrets of how she does it and how we can all do it. And so thank you, Casey. And I'm going to keep my mouth closed while you present, and I'll be back for some questions. One bit of housekeeping. Anybody who's out there who has a question, please type it in the Q&A, and I will make sure that I queue it up at the end for Casey. Thank you all. Thank you, Casey.
That was the kindest introduction. Thank you so much for that. I am thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be with SaksWorks, with The.Li.st. The.Li.st has been already changing my life. I've only been a member for a little while now, and it's been just incredible. So I'm very grateful that all of you are coming to hang out with me on Zoom, because I know how many Zoom meetings you probably have to be on from week to week. And so this is a real honor. When Anne told me the title for this, How to Talk So People Will Listen, I had a couple of thoughts. And thought number one was, wow, that's a great title. And thought number two was, if I could teach people how to do that in 45 minutes, I would. And I would also be a gajillionaire. I want to give you a little perspective shift here. There is no one on this planet who can teach you how to talk so people will always listen to you in 45 minutes, in 45 days, in 45 weeks. It's not possible. And here's why that's good news. If I could teach you how to talk so people would always listen, that would imply that there is one way to communicate correctly, that there is one way to do this right, so that people will always take you seriously, so that people will always think you're brilliant, so that people will always take your ideas and run with them. And the thing is, we get a lot of those messages day to day. And that goes to the reason why we started Vital Voice training. So my co-founder, Julie, and I started Vital Voice in 2014 at the height of what I call the great moral panic over vocal fry, which sounds like this. And everyone was writing all of these articles about how it was just impossible to take women seriously while they spoke like this. And if they would just stop doing that, then maybe they would be seen as the leaders that they want to be. And over the years, those issues have shifted. Sometimes we talk about upspeak, like that rising inflection at the end of a sentence, or we talk about eliminating problem words like saying sorry too much, or just is undermining your leadership, or maybe you're smiling too much, or you're not smiling enough. Everybody's got advice. But that presupposes a world in which tips and tricks would help you to a single model of putting on your serious voice, and then people would always take you seriously. And that's just not how communication works. There's no one right way to do this. There's no getting it right or getting it perfect, which hopefully is good news for any of my fellow perfectionists out there. So here's what I want to do today. In the few minutes that we have together, I want to give you a look at how your voice actually works, at what makes your voice yours, what makes it unique. I want to take a look at nervous system activation, which is the thing that is usually getting in the way of either feeling or being listened to. And I want to give you some new tools, because when we accept that there's no one way to get this right, we can start doing something way more interesting, which is finding what's effective in the moment. All communication happens in context, which means what we need in order to feel more confident are more tools, more choices that we can make to show up in the way that we want to be seen. So with that as our goals in mind, I'm going to do my very best to rein in how nerdy I am about all this stuff, and that I want to tell you everything and get to the good stuff. So let's start with what we like to call Your Voice 101. This is the big, complex, messy world of your voice and how it actually works in context. There are 4 arenas to Your Voice 101. There's the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the social. And all of those pieces work together in context to make your voice what it is in the world. So start with the physical voice. Your physical voice is exactly what it sounds like. It is the physical apparatus by which you create sound and put it out into the world. The physical voice is a 4-step process that begins with the impulse to speak. The thought, that's step number 1. That thought sends a signal to your lungs to check and see if you have air in there. And this is going to be very important later. So step number 2 is breath. We speak on an exhale. On that exhale, step number 3 starts, and that is vibration. Your vocal cords, which are 2 tiny little mucous membranes, they're about the size of your thumbnail. They're housed in this beautiful flexible instrument called your larynx, and they vibrate up to 440 times a second, and they wave together like this. It looks a little bit like a sea creature or a vagina. They on that burst open, we create sound. Now, the sound that your vocal cords create on their own is pretty tiny. So what actually amplifies it and brings it out into the world is when it meets step number 4. Step number 4 is your resonators. Your resonators are all the hard, bony places of your upper body, your chest, your mouth cavity, your teeth, your jaw, your hard palate, your nasal cavity, your skull. All of those places help your voice get amplified and sent out into the world, kind of like the body of a guitar amplifies the strings, or the body of a piano amplifies the strings as they're hit by the little hammers. So when we say that your voice is a full body instrument, we are being 100% literal. People think of their voices coming from their mouth or coming from their throat, and it really is an entire body process. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that there are all kinds of technical ways that you can learn how to use your voice in more interesting and fun ways. You can increase your range, you can increase your volume, you can explore how different resonators can make your voice sound differently. The complicated part is that our bodies are incredibly affected by the other three arenas. And the other complicated part is that often in our world, especially at work, we like to forget we have a body because bodies are inconvenient. Bodies are weird and gross, and they feel things too much. And that is something that can get in our way. We're going to get into more of that a little bit later, but let's go on to the other three arenas. So the mental piece of voice. As I already said, your physical voice starts with the impulse to speak. So that thought affects everything, the quality of that thought. And when I say quality, I don't mean good or bad. I mean literally the quality of the thought. What is the thought like? What does it hold in it? And particularly, how do your thoughts become speech? Everybody has different habits and different things that they prefer when this happens. I'm going to ask for a little chat engagement here. Throw an exclamation point in the chat if you are the kind of person who really, really prefers to have your thoughts beautifully crafted in your head before they leave your mouth. And throw a comma in the chat if you're the kind of person who actually prefers to come up with your thoughts as you're speaking. You speak to consider things. I'm seeing a lot. Okay, so far I see a lot of commas, exclamation points for the people who want to craft their thoughts in their heads. Beautiful. So hopefully you can see that these are two very different things. Now, as you can probably imagine, how that happens in context can mean that one or another type of person can be very uncomfortable depending on what's supported in the environment. But neither of those two things are good or bad. They're just our habits. The mental piece of voice also includes things like how prepared you feel in this moment or how you like to prepare. It includes things like your self-talk, what that little voice in your head is running on a loop right now, whether that's positive or negative. And it also goes into how we're perceiving what's happening in front of us, because our perception affects everything about what happens next in communication. And it especially affects how activated we are and how much we're feeling and thinking in that moment. So that takes us to arena number 3, which is the emotional piece of voice. And whenever we talk about this, I have to say that emotions can be almost like a dirty word, especially in the workplace. Throw a period in the chat if you feel like showing emotions at work is a fraught thing, is a perhaps dangerous thing for you, that you feel like, nope, can't show how I'm feeling at work, or at least can't show all of how I'm feeling at work. Emotions are real. They affect our bodies. I'm seeing lots of periods. That's fantastic. The way that we show emotions affects everything. Our voices are incredibly reflexive and responsive to our emotional state. Think about the difference in how we speak when we're like really angry about something versus when we're on the best first date in the world and everything's just vibing and we're having such a good time. Our voices sound different because our bodies adjust their actual physical structures in response to our emotional state. So here's the other thing your voice is really reflexive and responsive to: the act of hiding how you feel. All of us have been on the receiving end of a conversation where we're talking with someone and they're like, everything's fine. I am totally fine and not at all stressed out or angry right now. And you're watching that person and you're like, oh my God, like they are about to fully volcano and this is not going to go well. We all have a human bullshit meter, and the act of hiding emotions trips other people's bullshit meters. That is not a do or die prospect, I promise. There are things we can do about feeling our emotions. And in fact, feeling our emotions as opposed to shoving them down is a much more effective way to communicate through them. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. So let's get into the last piece of your complicated voice puzzle, which is the social arena. This is the context where everything happens. Every conversation that you have ever had in your entire life, from the time that you were a tiny baby, first learning how to make a noise so that someone else would come to you and bring you food or hold you and comfort you when you were upset, to the conversations that you had this morning, probably over Zoom, have gone into creating your vocal habits, your communication habits, because we as human beings are endlessly adaptable and endlessly socially cooperative. Throughout our lives, we create and break and leave and join new, what we call communication microsocieties. So your family is a communication microsociety with its own rules of engagement, with its own expectations, both stated and unstated, for how you're supposed to act in order to be successful. So does your school that you went to when you were a teenager. So does your workplace. If you've ever noticed how you pick up your friends' catchphrases eventually, or how when you get a new boss at work, everyone's communication style sort of subtly starts to change, that's because of that ability to adapt. We are endlessly adaptable. We also create habits, and sometimes we carry those habits from one environment to another. And those habits, which may have worked beautifully in one place, don't work as well in this new environment. And that can freak us out on so many different levels. But the thing is, we're endlessly adaptable. So we can create new habits. We can always add tools to our palette. And that's what I want to talk about today. The thing about the social arena and how it affects everything is that our bodies at all times have one primary goal. And that goal is to survive. That is your brain's highest goal at all times, to survive, to continue the species. Now, that instinct is very helpful, right? We wouldn't be here without it. But sometimes it gets in the way, especially of our other goals, which look like to succeed, to make our mark, to get our ideas out there, to be heard, to be listened to feel listened to. Because one of our other highest goals as a human being is to feel seen and heard. So, how does our survival instinct sometimes get in the way? Here's where I want to talk about nervous system activation. So now that you have this complicated picture of how unique your voice is based on all of those different factors, physical, mental, emotional, and social, let's talk about what happens when our nervous systems get activated. So I would love to see, we're just going to continue this whole punctuation mark in the chat thing because it's working great. Throw an exclamation point in the chat if you have ever been nervous talking in your life. And I'm going to put in some exclamation points right now because, hi, I was nervous before this thing actually started and I'm a professional. So I want to tell you a couple of things about nerves, and then I want to give you some ways to reframe them via these four arenas: physical, mental, emotional, and social. What to do about nervous system activation. So first of all, let's talk about what nervous system activation is. It's just the state of arousal where our amygdala has perceived a threat in the environment. And that threat can be anything from, I don't think this person likes me very much, to I feel like I'm going to lose my job. And when I lose my job, I'm going to lose my apartment. And when I lose my apartment, I'm going to be homeless and then I'm going to die, right? That is literally how stressed out our amygdala can get very, very, very quickly. And our amygdala is not sensible. It works very quickly to discern threats and to act on those threats in order to take us back to safety. That's its only goal, get us back to safety. So when I'm talking about nerves, I'm using that as a overarching term for kind of anything that falls under that umbrella. Fear, stress, anger, passion, all of that stuff falls under the umbrella of nervous system activation. What we do with it is what matters. So let's start with the mental, because I think sometimes this, for my very, very, very smart clients, is the easiest place to begin to address something. I want to give you a big old stake in the ground here. And that stake in the ground is there is no such thing as fearless public speaking. And when I say public speaking, I mean, everything from your dream TED Talk to talking to your boss in a one-on-one, speaking in public. There's no such thing as that being a completely fearless act. And that is, again, because of the fact that we're social creatures and because other people's opinions and other people's reactions to us matters. It matters to us. We are activated because we care. So once we accept that there's no such thing as fearless, we can actually get down to business, because so many people consider just feeling activated to be a stop sign, to be a sign of failure, to be a sign that they're never going to be good at this, to be a sign that this is not going well and it's only going to keep spiraling out of control. So once we've accepted that nerves are natural, nerves are just a sign that you care, a sign that this is important to you, a sign that you have something energetic to do and your body is giving you the energy to do it with, we can work with that. So now let's talk about the emotional area. Again, back to this discovery, this conversation about our complicated relationship with feeling our feelings in public. I want to say a few things about that. The consequences of feeling and looking and appearing emotional are different for different people. The more privilege you have, chances are the easier it is for you to display your emotions in public. And that's because of differences in relative power and status. Some people can throw a hissy fit at work and everybody just has to kind of deal with it. Some people, if you show any emotion, get pretty hardcore judged. Assumptions are made about you. So no wonder we have a complicated relationship with feeling our feelings in public. There are very real consequences for that. But the solution is not to try to shut them down. It's not to go into what Julie and I like to call neutral calm or an approximation of neutral calm. That's that thing of like, I'm fine, everything's fine, I don't feel anything. Because it's bullshit. Your body knows the difference. You can't gaslight yourself into pretending like you don't feel anything. And chances are you can't gaslight anybody else into making them think that you don't feel a thing. What you can do is acknowledge a few things. First of all, emotions don't last forever. The way that emotions actually work in our body is that they start as a physical sensation. So if anybody feels very brave right now in the chat, 'cause here's where we're kind of talking about like a little bit of the messy part between the emotional and the physical. If anybody wants to be very brave and throw into the chat right now, what are the physical reactions that you have when you get nervous? I'll give you a few examples. That clammy feeling on the back of your neck. For me, it's my hands shaking. My fingers start to tremble a little bit. Sweat, yes, right? This is why that whole thing about like never let them see you sweat as a part of executive presence is such crap, because guess what? We're sweaty humans. Humans sweat. It's a real thing. It's not a big deal, right? Nausea. Let's talk about nausea. So one of the things that happens when our amygdalas get activated is this idea of fight and flight, right? We're going to talk a lot more about that in just a minute. But guess what makes it easier to run away? When you eliminate all of your excess weight.
Oh my gosh.
I love that I got an actual reaction with that. Thank you. Right? When we get rid of all of the extra weight that we're carrying, our body knows that it will be able to run faster. There's a reason why we want to throw up or go to the bathroom when we get nervous. It's just our bodies doing a body thing to try to protect us. Same thing with our heart starting to pound. Same thing with our extremities getting cold. Your body is redirecting its resources to where they need to go in order for you to fight, run, or play dead. So here's how I want to talk about what we can do about those physical sensations of emotions, nerves, stress, fear. Chances are what's happening when we're in this socially cooperative mindset of, I don't want to show that I feel anything, I don't want to show that I'm nervous about this, et cetera, is we try to shove them down. We lock down. We just power through. It's like head down, power through. And chances are you've done two things. You've tensed up your body, you've started gripping, and you've stopped breathing. And if you remember what we were talking about with your physical voice, your breath is everything. Your exhale is what brings your voice out into the room. So if we stop breathing, what do we do with that vocally? Not to mention, when we stop breathing, we throw gasoline on the fire of our nervous system. So here's where we get into tools for nervous system activation. Here's what I want to give you. I want to give you two very simple things that hopefully you will be able to remember. Number one, if this became a hashtag that went viral in the world, I would be a very, very happy woman. Hashtag, let your butt be big. Let your butt be big. And I want you to experience this with me right now. All right, we're going to do a little demo here. What's the difference between your butt being big and small, right? When we get nervous, we tend to grip, right? Everything pulls in. I'm going to do good girl posture. Look how engaged I am. Look at how confident I look because everything's pulled up and pulled in and I'm ready to lean in and get my voice on the table, right? Oh man, doesn't feel good at all. When you let your butt be big, when you actually let your body have gravity in the world, that's the secret to gravitas. Find that spread in your chair, and that is the base of your power. It's the base of your support for everything else to happen because you're telling your body, I don't have to hide and I don't have to shove anything down. I can just let this happen. And step number two, I want you to breathe. And I know that sounds like the most basic advice in the world, but I'm going to give you a slightly different perspective on breathing. Chances are when we get tense, you start breathing more and more and more shallowly. Or if you've taken a lot of yoga class, you're like, I know what I need to do. I need to breathe into my belly. Well, here's the problem. You can't access a belly breath when you're nervous because the last thing in the world that your amygdala wants you to do when it senses a predator in the environment is release your soft bits so that you can be eviscerated. It's going to lock it down. So instead, I want you to think about taking a 360-degree breath into your rib cage. And I want to demonstrate this. I'm going to tilt my camera here because I got singer ribs, so they're very mobile. If you want to try this with me, you're very welcome to, even though I can't see you. Try to just put your hands on the side of your rib cage right underneath your armpits. And just feel those ribs right underneath there. And then allowing your shoulders to drop away from your ears and allowing your butt to be big, I want you to think about your body expanding in 360 degrees away from your spine as you inhale. Do you see how my shoulders don't really move at all? Now, some of you may or may not feel that, and that's because our bodies create physical habits just as much as they create other kinds of habits. This might be a difficult thing for you to feel, but I promise you can practice it. And I promise that it is a game changer in terms of calming down that nervous system. So let your butt be big, 360 breath, 360 breath. Just allow your body to take space from your rib cage. That signals to your nervous system, I don't have to hide, I don't have to run, and I don't have to fight. I can just sit here and be present. Yes, Superwoman Pose, very, very, very similar, right? But this is space that comes from the core. It doesn't even involve your extremities, right? You can sit in a state of pretty much relaxation in your extremities, and you just are taking space from here, which is the place where we connect with other people. This real estate from shoulder to shoulder and sort of from sternum through your face, that's the area we want to connect with people. When that's closed off, when we're hiding that, when we're collapsing that in, that's when it's hard to connect with somebody. You feel like you're being protected. So I'm looking at my time right now. I'm getting very excited about this. I have a few more things that I want to talk about, but I want to make sure that we leave time for questions. So I want to talk about the social arena and how we can use that as a tool to frame nervous system activation and get us back into a place where we can connect with our audience. So when we go into yes, Pam, literally where your heart is, exactly. When we're in nervous system activation, what tends to happen is our prefrontal cortex shuts off and we go into what Julie and I call Primal Objectives. And those follow the 4 paths that we can take in our nervous system. And this is a vast oversimplification of neurology, y'all. This is just language that hopefully will help you understand this. We've got fight or flight, which probably everybody here is familiar with. We also have freeze and fawn. So if you've ever been in a stressful conversation with somebody and all of a sudden you just want to destroy them, you want to destroy their argument, you want to make them feel small, you want to put them in their place, you want to just rip them to shreds, that's fight. That is the primal objective of fight. If you've ever been in a presentation and suddenly you find yourself rushing through and then I'm just going to speed up and get this done as quickly as possible because then I can get out of here, right? That's flight. That's the flight primal objective in action. If you've ever gone blank in the middle of a presentation, just forgot everything that you meant to say, that's freeze. And that happens as our body immediately senses a threat and figures out what to do with it. That's actually one of the easiest ones to get out of, unless you judge that moment of brain going blank, and then you're going to throw yourself down one of the other paths. Freeze is also the end of our stress cycle. And I want to sidebar this for a second. A lot of us are there right now. A lot of us deep down subconsciously at this point in year almost 3 of the pandemic are feeling very burnt out, are feeling very defeated, are feeling very much like there is almost nothing that we can do right now to affect things. And that can send us into the end state of freeze, where our bodies, oh so helpfully, play dead to facilitate a painless death. And that's when you just can't connect with anybody. You just don't want to. You're just burned out. You can't even care anymore. That's a protective thing that our bodies are trying to do to survive. And for that, my biggest recommended resource, read Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. Y'all, it is so good. It's on the resource list that I'm going to throw into the chat here in just a moment. But let's talk about fawn, because fawn is a place that is extremely socialized into women in particular. Fawn is the reaction where, when we are met with a predator, we are going to be very, very nice to them and be a very, very good girl and very enthusiastic and very accommodating. And we're going to make the predator feel very good about themselves because they'll like, look at your beautiful fur. You don't want to eat me. I'm so adorable. Or we go into, I'm going to show you what a rock star I am and how important it is for you to keep me around. And we start working really hard. But it comes down to this place of proving ourselves, of wanting to be liked, of trying to make ourselves indispensable. And it's a place that comes from fear. And it doesn't feel good to do. None of these reactions, these primal objectives, are bad in and of themselves. Sometimes we need them. Sometimes we need to be able to fight our way out of a situation. Sometimes we need to leave. And certainly sometimes an ego needs to be soothed before anything else can get done. But they're not great places to actually succeed, to actually do the thing that you're really there to do. And here's where I want to give you a tool, and I'm going to wrap this up really quickly so we can get to questions. I called these primal objectives. I want to talk about objectives as an art. And this is where we get into my actor training and it gets very nerdy. I'm going to do a very high level overview of this so that you guys can think about it as a tool to move forward with. Knowing what you want, because we always go into an interaction with some desire, with something that we're trying to achieve. When you know you're going into a high stakes communication moment, figure that out in advance. Give it some thought. Think about your given circumstances, that context that you're communicating in, and be a little bit of an investigator, a detective. Think about who you're talking to and what they want, what you know about the situation, what the stated goal of this meeting is, and what the unstated goal or the unstated vibe of this meeting might be. And listen, again, you're never going to get this right. This is all a guess. It's all an educated guess that we're making. But thinking about your given circumstances will then help us to craft an objective that can be more active, more connected to our audience, more connected to the people that we're talking to, so we can think about what we're trying to do instead of how we're doing. right? How is this going is a headspace that disconnects you and makes you a little harder to listen to. When you're focused on your goal, it gives you that North Star. And once you have that North Star, it's not a do or die. It's a direction. We can't hit a target if we don't know what the target is. It gives you that target. And then we have all kinds of different ways as human beings that we go about hitting that target. And that's where the art comes in. That's where the individuality comes in. That's where you can think about things like, what are my strengths that I'm bringing to the table? What are my ideas that I want to get heard in this moment? And you can operate from that place of empowerment as opposed to, I need to prove myself, or I need to be liked, or I need to just get this over as quickly as possible, or I need to destroy these people. So obviously, this is high level stuff. We could go into all of this so much more. I'm going to throw some resources into the chat for you. But I want to open it up. I want to invite Ms. Ann back and do some questions here and open it up to the audience. So throw those questions in the Q&A and we'll get talking. It'll be awesome. Hi, Ann.
Hi. I was the one who gasped out loud when you talked about throwing up as a flight response. And I didn't realize until that moment that my microphone was on. And so I apologize for interrupting and gasping.
It was perfect, Anne. I'm so glad you had it on. It was the exact reaction I needed.
It was just such a clear, I was having a very vivid memory of a incredibly high tension moment before a presentation I was about to give in a very unfriendly room. And on my way to that meeting, I threw up. And I had no idea why, and I'd never done that before. The meeting did not go well. In fact, the meeting didn't even happen, which is, I feel like it was the universe telling me this is not right for you. But I had never heard that before. And so there was so much, look, there was so much in what you just said that was amazing. I'm just changing there we go. That was amazing. And so I have a lot of questions. There are a bunch of questions in the Q&A. Anybody who's listening, please type them in. Please type your notes into the Q&A. But there's one piece that I want to talk about, which is what happens after of these big presentations, right? Because it's a roller coaster. And I think that it also informs how you present next time. Are you drained? Yep. Are you energized? Do you feel like the vulnerability hangover?
Yes.
What do we do about the after?
That is such a good question. And it's usually the last thing that people think about. So I'm so glad you're bringing it up now. I just so you know, I threw our post-workshop resources in the chat. Please go there, find a lot of stuff. So let's talk about the after. The first thing that I would say is resist at all costs the instinct to post-mortem things while your nervous system is still in activation. Even if you've been able to reframe those nerves as excitement, as a beneficial thing, like we talked about in the mental thing, when your nervous system is activated, it will imprint basically anything, and especially anything negative. So if you're thinking like, oh man, I can't believe I forgot to say that one thing. If you're criticizing yourself, you're going to imprint on your nervous system that speaking is stressful, that my body doesn't like this, that I don't like it. And it's going to be that much harder next time. So the first thing I would say is after you do a presentation, after you do a high stakes thing, reward yourself. Just like you would reward a puppy or a small child for doing a good thing. And don't frame this as a coping mechanism. Don't frame this as a like, oh, this was shitty, so I'm going to eat a pint of ice cream. Frame it as a reward. And then once your nervous system calms down, then we can actually postmortem. And I would say, start with what went well. Always start with what went well. There is something that went well, always. Then maybe think of 2 or 3 things at the most that you're like, didn't love that. And think about that for next time. And then you can actually strategize. Once your nervous system is calm, that's the most important thing.
Is it the thinking about it for next time? One of my instincts is always to like, how can I fix this now? Who do I need to call? What do I need to do? And I feel like I need someone in that moment to like say like, it's done. And like, move on, right? The moving on to the next piece feels like we could use a little Casey advice in the moving on.
Oh gosh, moving on. Yeah, I mean, listen, so I got to do a really cool performance opportunity a few months ago. I got to perform at the Netflix premiere of Tick, Tick, Boom with my amazing Broadway choir, the Broadway Inspirational Voices. And I had a little solo, which was very exciting. And I practiced and practiced. And let me tell you, when I was on stage, I felt all that nervous system activation. I did everything I know how to do. I breathed, I took space, I did this thing. And the solo did not come out the way I wanted it to come out. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't like the best that I'd ever sung it. And let me tell you how much I ruminated on that for the weeks afterwards, like watching the clips that were getting spread. I was like, oh, okay, right. I wish that I had foolproof advice for how not to ruminate on things. I think the biggest thing for me in that moment was kind of forcing myself to watch it, just to be like, you know what? It wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't how I wanted it to be necessarily, but it was fine. It was good. And it was exciting. And thinking back to like the positives of that experience helped me to kind of eventually get the negative ones out of my body.
I find I often watch videos of myself speaking or like photos, and I find that like if I'm being too tough or I can't watch it or it still feels really painful, I'm like, I will put this away until later. And then you'll be in time, right? Like a good significant, sometimes it's longer than you think it will be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then you can have greater compassion for that person in the video.
Absolutely.
And your notes, your critique won't feel so critical.
Yeah.
I want to go to Carla's question here because I think it's really amazing. Like she really loved your fawn metaphor in the chat. And she says, what if your historic fawn response was once a part of your recipe for success? She says is related to being a woman in a male dominated culture, but no longer works. It's now leading to burnout. And by the way, I just leaned over while you were talking and I had the burnout. This is the burnout book that Casey was talking about and that I had on my shelf. How do you pivot? How do you change something that's worked for you and isn't working for you anymore?
So here's where I think we can get into objectives and tactics as an art. So there is a reason why fawn, good girl, prove yourself, can work in certain environments, or that it is socialized into women in particular. And it's because it's what people expect of us. People expect women to be pleasing and lovely and smiley and polite and all of those things. So we didn't get into tactics today, which is sort of an underpinning of objective, right? If the objective is the North Star, the tactics are all the ways that you're going to go about achieving it. And we have a million of those in our arsenal. I want to use a very specific example where it kind of could look like fawn, but it's really just the tactic that underlies the real objective. For anyone in this room who has ever encountered a woman from south of the Mason-Dixon line and heard the phrase, "Bless your heart," that smile, that sweetness is a tactic underpinning my actual objective, which is destroy her, right? Or whatever, right? We can give people a soupçon of politeness, of sweetness, of pleasantness, of a smile, and still and have that over what we're really trying to do. And sometimes that's really effective. Sometimes what we need in the moment is to disarm somebody with a little bit of charm or a little bit of ease or a little bit of, like, I hesitate to say this, but like a little flirt in the moment, or tease or dazzle or any of those things. And this is where verbs become very fun to play with and imagery becomes very fun to play with. Sparkle. Yes, Pam, I love that, right? Think of these as ingredients that you have to play with, as opposed to things that you have to do or things that you must do in order to survive. That takes the angst out of them and puts them into the world of art. And again, there's no one way to get this right. There's only experimenting to see what's effective on you. Then we can actually do something with it.
talk about in the moment to pivot, right? You see this, or maybe not. I mean, you said, keep your goals in mind, but I'm imagining that moment when you look around the room and the eyes are glazed over, somebody's checking their phone. You can see that somebody's trying to wrap it up when you've got another like 3 talking points to go through and you haven't achieved your goal yet. How do you make moves in the moment?
Such a good question.
I'm asking lots of tactics. I know I'm asking.
Oh no, tactics are so great, right? A couple of things. So first of all, our clients at Vital Voice Training have a tendency to be very high achieving, very intelligent, very personal growth and personal development oriented people, obviously, or they wouldn't hire us, right? They also tend to be very self-critical. And they tend, again, especially in that nervous system activation moment, to see signs in the room that it's not going well amplified. And they're like, I'm an emotionally intelligent person. I'm seeing that this person's eyes are glazed over. That means I'm doing badly. I want to give you a tool to perhaps get past that moment, which is the tool of the benevolent assumption, the power of the benevolent assumption, which is, what if this has nothing to do with me? What if this has nothing to do with how this is going right now? What if this is that they're stressed about something that's completely separate from this moment? What if this is they just have resting bitch face and they don't know what they look like when they're listening to people? That is a possibility. It is a real possibility that this has nothing to do with you. That can help keep our nervous system humming along. But the other reality is that sometimes we have to change tactics. Tactics, again, it's not a do or die. It's a North Star. And sometimes we have to pivot. And that goes back to, your knowledge of the given circumstances, your ability to remain present and observational without starting the judgment cycle. And that, again, it's about agency. It's about creativity. It's about trying something different. If it's not working, try something different. We all know how to do that. For any moms out here, right? Sometimes when the objective is get the toddler in the car, and you have to try 52 different ways to get the toddler into the car, but eventually you can do it. We are all creative people with the ability to pivot.
I love that. I like the benevolent assumption. I think that works in so many places in our life. But it also points really to Kathy Sandler asked a question, which is, do you have tips for listening when you want to talk? And so, actually, I was thinking as you were talking about your RBF or someone's RBF, that we have Thaler Picard coming up in a later session talking about how to listen. Thaler's on this call. I saw her in the audience. But there is a moment where even in your biggest presentation, right, that you have to be engaged with someone, and that person, you have something to say, but they're moving past you. How do you stay in that moment?
So as a chatty extrovert, that is something that I've had to work on. I can't wait to hear what Thaler has to say about this, because she is the expert on listening. But what I would say for me is thinking about why I want to talk in this moment. And is my urge to talk coming from trying to prove myself, trying to be liked? Is it coming from that place of activation, or is it coming from a genuine thing that I want to share? If it's coming from a place of nervous system activation, if I'm in that space of trying too hard, which is kind of like my defense mechanism, I have learned to take a breath, to reconnect to the person, and to really think about what it is they're saying. If you're worried you're going to lose your very beneficial thought, especially in the context of a meeting, write it down, especially on Zoom. Nobody can tell. Just write it down. Just preserve it for yourself in some way. But I would say in the moment, it's It's the act of choosing to be present. And this gets into, we could go very far down. We don't have time to talk about the 3 circles, but Patsy Rodenberg's marvelous book, The Second Circle, is on that resource page that I linked in the chat. And that's a great framing for how to stay in that place of presence with other people, as opposed to shrinking into yourself or trying to blow up and dominate for any reason whatsoever.
That brings me to a question that I was thinking as you were talking about, how do we not perform, right? The I am performing the role of a confident woman, right? or whatever it is, you've seen people perform, right? They're like, I'm the cool guy, or whatever it is that, this person is not showing up as their most authentic self. And yet sometimes, like, you see it in other people, but it's hard to do yourself. And yet at the same time, it's a performance, right? You are presenting, we are going through voice training, we're thinking through our steps, we are letting our butts be big in our seats, right? There's a lot of that performance that goes into it. And then how do you strip that away and show up as yourself?
So here's a big reframe for you. All of us are performing all of the time.
Oh, okay.
Whenever we're in front of other people, Julie and I dove into authenticity and the idea of authenticity a year ago, and Alec accidentally wrote a short book, which I just linked. It's for free. Download it if you're curious. Irving Goffman, this sociologist in the 1950s, talked about performance theory, basically, which is literally all the world is a stage, right? We all show up in different situations, hoping that people will see us in a particular way. It's just the fundamental truth of being a human around other humans. That said, obviously there are backstage places in our lives where we get to fully let that guard down, and we get to just be with other people and not filter, not have that guard up. And then there are places that are more high stakes where we do have more. And the thing is, not everyone in your life deserves your backstage version, right? Our backstage version is for our most trusted, intimate friends. Our onstage version, the public facing version of us, it's okay to think about curating that. There's a place where we can certainly go too far with that. And that's when our human bullshit meter gets tripped, right? But the act of showing up intentionally is not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, right? We have some unhelpful ideas about authenticity, right? Authenticity means I am the same person in all circumstances. Well, that's not true. Nobody talks to a puppy the same way they talk to their boss. Number 2, authenticity means everyone gets the full truth of what I am thinking and how I am feeling in all circumstances. Well, only very privileged people can get away with that. Lots of people can't get away with that, right? So that's not really helpful. And then there's what we call aspirational authenticity, which is where we have the self-knowledge. We're thinking about what our unique skills and our unique core values are. And we are, with intention, with agency, with a desire to make a mark on the world, bringing ourselves to the moment and remaining present and fluid in that. And I think that's where self-knowledge comes in. And then that's also where finding the balance of how much we care about what other people think is important. And that's where this work gets a little into like therapy territory. We're trying to very carefully walk that line, but it really comes down to, what do you want to be in the world and how do you want to get there?
I would take my therapy from you and how you show up in the world any day, Casey Erin Clark. I love this so much. I appreciate your time and your energy and all of the people who've shown up here today, listers, SaksWorks members, the Big Life community, friends of the list and the Big Life community. Thank you all so much. And thank you particularly to Rachel and SaksWorks for this amazing series. It is such a privilege to be able to learn from you today. So I thank you all.
And thank you. That was amazing. I'm sitting here on my butt, which I've allowed to be big. So feel like I've taken away at least that, but a few more things. Felt my rib cage, the whole thing. Casey and Anne, thank you so much. That was incredible. I want to remind everyone before we close, there are so many resources in the chat right now that Casey left, and we're going to put everybody's social handles in the chat as well, plus a link to the SaksWorks events video library, so you can just take a spin, see what else we have going on. And then I also want to remind you that we have this incredible Learn with the List series going on for the next 5 weeks. So it's going to be every Thursday at 1 p.m. You can just go ahead and put that in your calendar, and then you can sign up for each of them and enjoy amazing content just like this. So thank you again, Casey and Anne, for this amazing session. And thank you to The List for being a wonderful partner to SaksWorks, and my dream, as many of you watching will know, because love both organizations. And please do come and visit us online in this space, and also in real life in this space whenever you can get a chance. Please go to SaksWorks.com and download your complimentary day pass. And I will look forward to meeting people in person or seeing you again next Thursday at 1 p.m. for the next installment of Learn with the List. And at any other point for any of our other programming, we're so happy to have you. And I'm looking forward to, I guess, listening to all of you as you speak. And I guess we will go forward with hashtag let your butt be big. Is there another way to end? I don't think
it's the best.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rachel.